My name is Brian Wish. I'm an entrepreneur, CEO, and pathfinder. If I've learned anything in life, it's that self-discovery is a critical part of living intentionally, building meaningful relationships, and achieving the future we see for ourselves. In July of 2021, I sold all my possessions, headed west, and began a quest to live a fuller and more meaningful life. The experience helped me truly understand the power of a single moment. And through my conversations with leaders from all walks of life, I've seen how that one phone call, heartbreak, diagnosis, or lost job can transform the entire course of our lives. In this podcast, I sit down with entrepreneurs, influencers, and experts across industries to talk through the events that changed everything. Together, we'll relive the make-or-break decisions, hard conversations, periods of despair and hope, chance encounters, and everything that followed. Rob Castaneda, founder and CEO of ServiceRocket, defines leadership as a journey and a craft, not just a task to complete. While a BSc in computer science from the University of Technology, Sydney shaped his career, Rob's parents and grandparents taught him the value of hard work and focusing on the internal reward. Along with a passion for instrumental guitar and competing in triathlons, Rob is an active member of the Entrepreneurs Organization and current president of its San Francisco chapter. Rob's one-away moment came when two major life transitions culminated in him rethinking everything. Find out how his journey changed the course today on The One Away Show. Rob, welcome to The One Away Show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to catch up.
Yeah, great to have you here as well. So, Rob, what is the one away moment that you want to share with us today?
I think the one moment I will share will be, I would say, late 2017, early 2018. And that was a time period where both of my grandparents, who I was pretty close with, were coming to the end of their journey with us. My grandmother had recently passed, and I'd promised my grandfather that I would take him back to Malta, where he grew up and where he was from. And at the same time, our business had basically ground to a halt on just too many ideas and not being deliberate enough in what we wanted to do or what I wanted to do as a leader and as the founder of the company. And made a bunch of interesting hires, and I think there was a moment where we basically were going to run out of money as a company and say, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're not going to be around long enough. And so early 2018, we started to get very deliberate and decisive about what was important to us, important to me, and really just strip back a lot of stuff everywhere, right? So that was reassessing, where did I want to live? How did I want to show up as a husband, as a father? And we started making really good decisions. I would say we started making great decisions that were tiny. And every decision we made was in line with where we wanted to go, or where I wanted to go then. And that was a really big turning point, to go from a point where we were at death's door of being a statistic after, 17, 18 years in business, and running out of money and all those interesting things that founders go through. And in a 6-month period, we had turned that around, and I was able to make the trip with my grandfather and took him back. But I mean, there's still a lot of changes and things that we needed to do ongoing, but we continued that. And I think it was just a really good pivot point, not necessarily a pivot strategy wise. Overall, the business still does the same things, but really just a strong awareness of what to do.
Yeah. Wow. I'm sure that was incredibly altering in the moment of that realization that you may not be around with all the hard work you'd put in up to date. My question for you, though, is a number of questions around this, but when you realized in that moment that, hey, we may not be around if we don't really kind of crank into gear properly, like what went through your mind? Like, was it, I mean, I'm just curious, what did you face, you know, in that moment?
I went through a whole range of emotions, right? One of them was like, okay, wait, maybe I'll just sell the company, and and then I play this thing in my mind, and my mentor tells me, he's like, just keep saying, and then what, right? So okay, I'll sell this, and then what? Okay, maybe I'll help another business. Okay, and then what? Maybe I'll buy another business, and then oh wow, I could grow it. And then at some stage, it was like, well, hey, you know where all the skeletons are in this business. You know where all the bodies are buried, right? You know where all the problems are. Why aren't you fixing them? Why aren't you working on them? Why aren't you like leading?
Mm.
And the other point which came to that, which was, I remember writing a check from the home loan to make sure that the company was, strong enough to make commitments. And I remember having a really honest chat with the team and kind of saying, look, if this all falls over, you go and get another job. But as an entrepreneur, if your life's work falls over, it's a little bit harder to pick everything back up and get going. And especially coming from an Australian background where it's you kind of one and done entrepreneur type thing. So I think it was kind of a deliberate, I clearly remember that. And then it was like, when my grandfather passed away, a really good friend of mine, he told me this line. He said, hey, you can always be a kid while you still have a grandparent. And there's this thing that happens when you don't have any more grandparents, that you kind of have to grow up.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like, a rite of passage in a way, but also just a realization of the role that I play in family communities, more than just, okay, go and run a business and make money so you can go on holidays or do whatever, things that we might aspire to do. It's also like, how am I showing up for my family, for my community, for my team here, and all that then led into COVID, right? And the pandemic and everything that went with that. So I think we had good footing. Not only had we avoided getting, going off the cliff, I think we also got ourselves on a really good spiritual leadership footing, to understand, okay, we know why we exist and where we exist and what we're trying to do. And that was, I think, very big. So
Yeah, totally. It seems like a lot of readjustments that you had to make in that conversation with your team. I'm sure really put life reality into picture very quickly. Rob, as you've been talking, you said before 2017, 18, you didn't have maybe that full clarity of vision where those decisions could compound in like the direction of that vision and get you to where you wanted to go. Was it that you hadn't really shaped the vision up until that point and it was just to make money and build something? Like, from knowing you seem a fairly intentional, thought-provoking individual. And I'm just curious, you've been doing this for some time now. Like, why was the vision not shaped, or why was the clarity not in place in the first place?
one of the easiest ways we learn things as humans is through emulation, right? And I think as entrepreneurs, we don't, by default, have a lot of things to emulate that are holistic. You could see bits and pieces, you can read articles, you can watch some videos, you can, you hear all the success stories, and you hear the different anecdotes, right? Like, hire smart people, get out of their way. And that's one that really, I think I challenged that one to say, well, every time we do that and we hire smart people and get out of their way, they create what they think is amazing. But at the end of the day, when it doesn't work, who has to clean it up and try and make sense of what it is? And this is not a great way to run a business. So rather than, herding cats per se, right? It was more like, no, this is what we're doing. We love consensus, all of us, right? By default, we want to turn up in a room and have everyone aligned and loving the decisions that we make. And I think I flipped the priority of that, getting us onto the right pathway, flipping the priority, saying, no, this is what's right for the business. Because if the business is strong, it'll provide for people. And we kind of came out with the mantra, which is, we use the metaphor of a tree for the company, right? I love these big redwood trees around here in California, right? And it's like, wow, a big, strong tree provides, right? Or, even an apple tree, or, just a nice tree that's doing stuff. And so I explained to the team that every time somebody asks for something and we can't afford it, it's like saying that the company is a tree. And every time you ask for something because another company has it, hey, Google provides this, or, Facebook provides this, whatever, we're competing with all these different companies. And so every time we provide something that we can't really afford, we're actually taking a piece of the tree away to feel good about a comparison. So I changed the mantra of the business. Instead of like happy employees mean that the business will be happy, it's more like, well, if we all grow the tree, we can all share the fruit. And if the tree doesn't grow or the tree's not healthy, it's not going to produce much, if any, fruit. And if the tree has a bumper year and there's lots of fruit, share it, right? So I explained that, and we actually use that as a guiding principle for all of our people-based systems and processes and policies and benefits. We set a vision to restructure all of our benefits and all of our, compensation structure. We had like 7 different compensation models in the company because every team had created their own thing and all that stuff. And we actually reworked all of them into one. And our bonus program for the company is called STF, because we love our acronyms here at ServiceRocket. And STF stands for Share the Fruit, right? And everyone in the company, from me down to our level 2, right, folks, which would be our graduates, right? Everybody is on the same structure of a program where there is a base and there is a variable. And in the variable, there's a piece of it which is tied to sharing the fruit, and that piece is linked to EBITDA of the company. The company can make profit, everyone gets a piece of it, right? And obviously, depending on what level you're on, it's a little bit different, the amount, but we're all aligned, right? And as I was building that structure, nobody told me it was a great structure, right? I'm not going to go as far as saying there was lots of doubt, because there wasn't really a lot of doubt. There just wasn't a lot of like, yeah, that's the right thing to do. That's the right way to go. Right. And I think that's kind of one of the dangerous things, or that area in the middle where if you do something and someone tells you that's awesome, it's good. If someone tells you that's crap, that's also good, because you're like, okay, am I either going to fight it or I'm going to just take the advice and not do it, right? Because everyone says it's a bad idea. When you do things in the middle, and you're not really clear on what you're trying to do, I think it's dangerous, or could be dangerous, right? If you're not clear, because then it's hard to do that. But we got through it, and it turned out to be a really good alignment program for the company. And now everyone's got their STF, and every quarter, everyone is like, how can I impact EBITDA this quarter? Like, that's on everyone's mind, and which is a lot better than, where's my bonus, right? Or that welfare mindset of, can we get this? Can we get that? My friend's company does this. My friend's company does that. So that was one key moment, or key mantra, or mindset, mental model that we changed, which is just, how do we do compensation? How do we think about that? Because we're never going to pay the same amount as, your Google's the classic one, but any of those big 5 companies are going to pay their graduates is like almost the same as what I would take home, right? So, so it's really being deliberate and clear about that. And we operate in like 9 or 10 countries. So also building a structure which is consistent across all the countries so that people can manage properly was a big part of that. So we did it. So.
Yeah. Wow. The profit sharing model tied to EBITDA. I like how it equalizes the whole everyone's work, right? Everyone's contributing to share the fruit, as you said. It's funny. I met someone this summer who's building a software model that like integrates into companies that enables sharing the fruit very easily. So it seems like you were onto that pretty early. Rob, it would be great for those that don't know. We haven't really touched on it yet, but maybe share what ServiceRocket actually does. Maybe a bit of the impetus for getting it off the ground.
I'm Australian, but I live here in California, in Silicon Valley, where we are a tech-enabled services company. And what we do is we partner with software companies to help them build out a lot of their human elements, like their support, their consulting, their deployment models, how they train their customers, the training for their customers, the extensions of their platform, like apps or other items that they'll need. And then we scale those globally. So we have about 350 people in our company. We have an engineering team that builds apps. We have consultants that go out and deploy software and train customers, and a phenomenal support team. I'm tech enabled because we use technology, whether that be now it's kind of fashionable to do AI. There's also a lot of need for human touch and human empathy and understanding what challenges customers have. So we partner with software companies predominantly out of Silicon Valley, but really anywhere. And then globally, we help their customers deploy software and help them also skill up other partners. And we've been doing that since 2001. My background is I started off in tech when I was 17. I worked on the help desk of a software company called Borland Software. And I went around from working in support to working in pre-sales training. I actually then went into QA and engineering, and I did a whole gamut of things. And I realized that there were some really good sales, customer-facing people that didn't understand technology very well. And there was also folks who were really smart and got stuff, but they couldn't communicate very well or couldn't read the challenge of the customer. And I studied computer science, and then working in support. And, I'd worked at IKEA furniture before that, so I kind of learned a little bit of customer service. And it was like combining those things, I was able to get a really good result for the customer, whether that be internal or out there. As one of our paying customers, and I could listen and I could write code, right, and kind of be a translator between the different teams and different people. And I thought everyone could do that. Let me rephrase that. I thought everyone enjoyed doing that. Right, because there's even people who can do it and they just don't want to do it because they would rather talk to a machine. And it turned out to be a thing where it's like, yeah, there's not that many people who can do it, who enjoy doing it. Right, we have this thing in our company right now. I'm challenging everybody to say, look, in a 2x2 matrix, can you be happy and productive here? Right. So can you really enjoy what you're doing and be productive for the tree? Right. Because if you're productive but not happy, then it's not good. And if you're not happy and productive, or any of the pieces are missing, not productive and happy, then okay, that's a cheerleader, right? Then I don't think that's a good thing. So I think being happy and productive, actually communicating with people and building tech at the same time, that was what I was doing. And so in 2000, I moved from Sydney to work in the .com boom here in the Valley. 2001, everything crashed. I went back to Sydney. I started the business back then. And in 2000, and I was coming back here, a couple of times a year. But in 2008, 2009, when it was the global financial crisis happened, mathematically, it was a really good time to make the jump. So we started in a crash. I moved to the US in the next crash. Now we're going through the next piece, I guess, probably our third or fourth economic downturn that we've been through.
Quite the journey. I loved how you were talking about the IKEA, putting furniture together to, learning how to build and code and translate. I mean, I think skills right on the ground floor that where you can enable an operation of 300 some people, but it took really the doing, the managing, and the translation across teams in an organization, right? So it's neat that you took your one skill and productized it across.
Retail, people that work in retail, it's really important, or it's really key. There's go back to that happy and productive thing.
Yeah.
I remember working at IKEA, and there were people who were like, "Oh, this is my job. I really hate it here, but it's my job." And they might be good at it, right? They're unhappy and productive. Then you've got folks that are really happy to be there that just aren't contributing, right? And I found that if I was in a mental state, or just a state of actually being happy and content with the situation I was in right now, right? Not to say not have any ambition, but to be like, hey, if I'm putting in a 4-hour shift, then if I put myself in a mode where I'm going to help the customer solve their problem and enjoy it, right? When you go and have a retail experience and maybe the barista is like, wow, this person's really friendly and really into it, right? Not just here's your coffee and away you go. So I found that if I could do both of those things, or get on both of those things, especially now when I reflect back, that's flow. That's the definition of being in flow. And that's where opportunities, challenges turn into opportunities, doors open, you meet people, you make an impression on people when you're in that state, right? You don't make a positive impression on people if you're unhappy and productive, right?
Rob, I want to go back to where we started, right? You talked a lot about kind of what led you to that moment where you're on the brink, bringing things together with clarity and vision, better alignment, profit sharing. 6 years later, 7 years later, when you decided to make those changes in that moment, what did you start to notice, right? What changed? What transpired? And I would say maybe first talk about like what changes did you have to make, or where did you have to grow on a personal level, and how did that impact everything professionally and externally?
I think I mentioned holistically I looked at things. So, up until then, I never went to the gym. I never did any, anything healthy. I don't drink alcohol and stuff like that, but just in general, I wasn't doing anything proactive. So, I had started doing that and went from a journey of going to the gym, learning how to run, which I'm still terrible at. But then, with a fellow Rocketeer here, I signed up to do a half Ironman, and I couldn't swim. And part of like the mental training we did, and started working with a mental skills coach, not just for sport related stuff, but also just from a mindset on the business, was that really great athletes have a process driven mindset, right? And it's all about the number of reps and getting better at the reps and getting better at what they're doing versus did the goal go in. And we had a company value called focus on the outcome. And we actually changed that company value to build process to drive outcomes. So the focus became on the process, and part of that mental skills training, and that coach is now on staff with us at the company. Part of that is actually one of those mantras or pieces we went through was how to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And how do you do hard things and attack them with process? Eat the elephant one bite at a time type thing. So actually signing up for an Ironman 70.3 when you can't swim and you know that you have to swim 1.2 miles in the ocean is a pretty good thing to say, holy shit, I gotta break this down and work backwards, and I got lessons and learned how to swim, right? And it's like, okay, you're not going to show up on day one and do that, but you can kind of watch me like a washing machine in the pool, trying to work out what to do. And so I think that mindset, we brought it into the business really clearly, which is about being process driven, being comfortable with the uncomfortable things and not trying to please everybody, but being clear, having clarity as to what we're trying to do, so that you're not wasting time saying to yourself or having that voice say to yourself, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Just because I didn't get the outcome that I wanted. But it's more, hey, this is the process. This is where we're going. That then makes things really holistic. Like for us, we ended up building a really strong wellness program in the company, a really strong culture of people challenging themselves, not just doing necessarily physical races, but there are people who are doing hiking and they're doing bike riding, or they're going out, kayaking. Hey, one of my goals is to get out and walk with my significant other, right? And so we have this culture of accountable wellness. As I was talking about our compensation program, we have half of the variables based on EBITDA and share the fruit. The other half is based on goals, and everybody has a wellness goal, right? That actually they get paid on. So, and when we talk about wellness here at ServiceRocket, we're talking about building positive habits, right? So not about winning a race, right? Or coming first or whatever it is, but not the outcome, but it's about building positive habits. One of the positive habits to build is, when I fall off the horse, I get back on, right? And don't beat myself up, right? Because I think often when you're trying to make change and you fall off, right? I had a party and I ate a whole bunch of birthday cake or whatever it is. You feel guilty and you're like, okay, I'm off, right? I think as humans we're adaptable, but I think we need permission at times to get back on the horse.
I really resonate with the process mindset for a number of reasons. We can talk about offline, but I met I think I met the sports guy at the game night you put on for EO.
Yeah, you met Graham. Yeah,
Graham, phenomenal, and totally connected with the talk. You talked about how you brought that into the company. He's on staff. You talked about the wellness programs, and maybe you just described it. So I could, this may not be a great question, or it could be. How do you scale process and mindset to an organization of 200, 300 people to focus on process? Like, what does that look like at an integration level? And have you noticed since then a change in EBITDA, a change in new ideas in departments? Like, what have you noticed as like very explicit, tangible ROI from just ideas?
Yeah.
What's come out of that?
The world has changed, right? So previously everyone was in the same city, in the same office, and HQ of a company was all together. And I think part of me wishes, oh my God, wouldn't it be great to have everyone in the same building and come to work? And so even here in our Palo Alto office, there's like 5 of us here today, right? And out of a 300 and something person company, because we're all distributed, we're all located around the world. So I think there's definitely been a few different changes, not just in hybrid work, but we also operate in 9 or 10 countries, right? And so then you have cultural aspect to it. And the third one you have then is a generational aspect, right? Where you have some folks who have, maybe 20, 30 years experience and are used to doing things a particular way. And the world has just changed, right? So when we started the company, and the iPhone didn't exist. It's crazy to think about that, right? Facebook didn't exist. Social media didn't exist. And so ever you want a reminder that you're not young, so trying to then say, go and implement and execute a lot of process is also kind of dangerous, because the word process, right, depending on where you are in the world, is people take different interpretations to it. Some people take it as, I've got really hard and fast rules, like an ISO compliant document, and everyone must follow everything that's going on. And if you operate in a control mindset, you're going to have limited success. Because you just, especially in this dynamic environment, you're just not going to be able to see everybody. You're not going to be able to build all the relationships, you don't have the control that you might have been used to a couple of decades ago. And so part of the the piece to try and get people in is, how do you close the loop? And I would kind of say it's almost like, I think about momentum a lot, and like the wind, right? The wind blows, right? The fog's blowing in. There's no exact border of where that stops, right? But there's a momentum, and the breeze is coming in from the west, right? And so as we're building process, what I'm talking to our team about is like, well, our process is really the last time we ran something, how did it go? And what did we learn, and what do we improve for the next time? Versus, hey, I've spent 6 months documenting and everyone follow these rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because if you can get everyone to play with momentum and see momentum and work on momentum, then when things mess up, they pick them up and move them the right way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so as long as you're continually doing that, if you operate from a control perspective, that means you're taking the initiative off the people that are running the process or doing things, and you say, here's the rules, and something doesn't match the rules, they throw it back at you, right? Well, hey, you tell me what you want me to do here, right? And you don't scale when that happens. Now, there are times when you do need to follow exact steps, but I would say the overwhelming majority of time, you're trying to get a mindset and a momentum going, and that's how you get scale, right? Every time someone has to ask a question that they don't have ownership of to make a choice, it's like having a bike tire and someone putting a stick in the middle of the bike tire, right? Bang, everything stops until you get an answer, right? And so if you have a culture of that, then it's hard to get momentum. In order for that to happen, you need to have a lot of trust, right? Trust that, hey, if something goes wrong or whatever it is, I'm not going to lose my job, or we're going to be safe from that regard. So I think the biggest one in trying to get scale going is like, hey, the process is like gardening. It's never perfect because the world changes, the situations change. But if we're rowing in the same direction and we can continually get better at it, that's actually a huge win.
You talked about momentum, but the relationship between process that builds momentum, and when you apply process across a series of foundations that are all going in the same direction, that's when scale can happen within a company. When you do it with culture, product, people, all the different is what I'm hearing you say. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think they all work together, and it's different in different businesses. But I'm always really curious about stuff like, there are companies that have such great reputations, but when you dig under the surface, you realize, okay, hey, pieces of that company are amazing and other pieces are not.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we tend to label stuff a lot like, okay, that's an awesome company, everything they do is amazing. I think everyone is a work in progress, and stuff that was built will rot over time, right? Nothing lasts forever. So I think that the momentum is really important. That's the energy. That's the want to feed the tree. That's the want to close the loop, to get the learnings, to create the next iteration of what we're doing. I have this kind of mindset that I challenge our marketing and design team on, which is, there is this in like branding, there is always this need to create this branding templates and guidelines of our brand, right? And I've seen this over the years, probably at least a dozen times, where someone new comes in and says, well, the guidelines are not where we need them. We're going to spend time fixing the guidelines. And that's a really creative project for the person creating the guidelines. What it does for everyone else is strip out all the creativity, right? Because then it turns into the policing. Have you followed the guidelines or not followed the guidelines, because I need 3 pixels between this and that, whatever it is, right? The way I would want to think about it is like, well, can't the guidelines be really small? Like, this is our logo and we like it in black and white, or we like it in this color. But what if the brand guidelines was just the last thing we did? And the example I gave is a really controlled design guideline would be like traffic signs, right? It's probably the number one, signage at an airport, right? But traffic signs, a stop sign, you don't want any creativity in a stop sign, right? Way on the other end of creativity, and it's kind of coming back into fashion, but I would say album covers of bands is a really good example of a creative design, right? You're a Beatles fan, Led Zeppelin, Metallica, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
You're a different generation, right? But so take those bands, and maybe the logo is the same, but the album style of the cover is all different, right? It's not as if you get, hey, this is the first album, and it's black and white, and here's to the design guidelines. The second album is exactly the same. We just changed the numbers, and everything's exactly the same. The third one's exactly the same. That's not what they do, right? But maybe the logo stays the same, or it evolves and changes a little bit, but the style also changes with the times and what's there. And so I try and encourage our team to think that way, that the latest way we did something is the standard.
Right.
But your brief is to do better, right? And you can add your little touch to it, right? You can add your little, oh, wow, flowers are in fashion right now, and I want to do this, or pastel colors, or whatever it is, right? New filters, right? AI generated, I don't know, whatever, right? So giving that creative freedom a little bit to say, oh, well, if we bring everything back to the previous bit of work, then there is actually a flow and an evolution without somebody having to say, no, I'm doing the guidelines, you must follow my guidelines, right?
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's like process doesn't have to be restrictive. It can be flexible, and you learn and adapt from the process that forces iteration.
Yeah. Depends where your business is. I mean, if you're running a QA business on medical devices, I'm pretty sure you want really clean process. I think for most of us entrepreneurs, the ability to do that and provide that creative area for people to use their initiative and use their thoughts and skills, I think is really important.
Rob, we've touched on this 20 plus year journey of yours, and congrats on all the evolutions you've gone through. Where have you found the most moments of just deep satisfaction and joy, and over the last 2 decades? What stands out to you? And then as you look to turn the page in a way, or maybe not turn the page, but as you look at the next 10 years or 20 years, what excites you the most?
We've been culturally strong since we started. We did our values in 2007. We made a change to that with the process stuff, right? We renamed to ServiceRocket in 2013. We had some really other weird name, very techie name before that. Evolving where the company has been really interesting to kind of watch it grow up, right? 2 years ago, we did a really big project on the next version of our culture and really being clear about why we're here and what we're trying to do. And I think for us, it wasn't about trying to get to an IPO as an outcome. You see many companies that are kind of great, they IPO, and then they just, fall down, right? Because it just becomes a corporate machine. And one thing we did is we built this thing called the Rocketeer Promise. And it says, why are we in business? What are we promising to do? What's our contribution to the world? And then we built that, and it was pretty cool because we didn't actually need to think too much, because we were already using the language inside the company a lot, right? And so the Rocketeer Promise is really simple, right? It's to have an impact on our Rocketeers and help them learn and grow, so they can have an impact on their career, their family, and their community. And the part that we wanted to contribute and bring to the lives of our Rocketeers is really helping them grow and have impact. If we take care of them and take care of the environment that we're all working in, we can spread that to our customers who might pick us or might pick a competitor. But if the competitor that we have is a private equity funded company who's just about the bottom line, and there's just a difference in how things work. growing up with migrant parents is that we have a lot of migrants in the company, people that have moved countries as well. And I think a lot of us, there's this thread that goes through a lot of us, is that I don't think we're trying to compete to see who can get the biggest boat. Those things were actually more focused on how do we help people have an impact, and whether for them, and they're at a stage where it's just their career because they're studying on the other side of the world, trying to make their life work to the point where they can have a family. And, from there, the folks that have families, how do we help them contribute and be part of the community? Not just be a consumer on their phone, looking for a better deal everywhere, right? So it's pretty simple from our regard, and for us, we also being in business now for 22 years. This is year 23 that we started. It's like we want to be in business for at least another 23. So we're not focused on building the best AI technology or whatever the flavor of the month is. I think underneath it all, there is great people and great humans that are going to build technology and build solutions and want to do that in a very authentic and compassionate way.
I love your version of your manifesto. It sounds like you're staying true to your values, right? I think in the building a large service business in the backyard of Silicon Valley, there's that, I think, temptation to be sexy and flashy.
Oh man, I've been through that. It's like everyone will tell you through experience or just through things that they read, don't build a services business, right? You want to build a product and you want to do this, you want to do that. It's like, well, that's great. I think we found our niche here of like, okay, that's fine, but there is a need for what we do, and we might not be the fastest growing company ever, but we can grow our tree the way we want to grow it. And look at the article I read from the Basecamp guys, but which is really true, right? We're actually only competing against our own costs, right? And in business, if you're profitable, you don't need anyone else's validation that you can be in business, right? Yeah. So as long as you can afford to be in business, you're there. So for us, it's a real challenge for us to be really strong and auditable in what we do, but also be very comparable against our competitors, and see how that we can continually benchmark ourselves and compete. Yeah. And as long as we beat our costs and deliver on for customers, then we have a right to be in business.
Rob, this has been absolutely a joy. My last question to you is, we touched on a number of things here. Is there anything, as you kind of look back in these last 50 or so minutes and you say, I really wished I gave a mention to this, or I really wish I shed a light on that?
Not in particular. I think there's one thing that the big lesson I guess I had on what we're doing is that I could easily have had a good outcome for me. And I think the transformation we did and the team helped with that we did was set ourselves up as a company to be able to have an impact and on many, right? And the team that's here. And I think there is, I see a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of businesses get to that first stage and then kind of stop, right? And there's no right or wrong, but it would be great to keep encouraging folks to learn how to scale past, what they can control, and get into a creative space and see how they can empower what's possible, right? And so that's what I hope to inspire by having people really think about get clarity on what's important to them and what's important on what they want to leave behind and enable, and get joy out of. I mean, every day I'm looking at our internal workplace system and kind of seeing all these amazing ideas and projects and things that people are doing. And, that's the beauty of not trying to control everything, right? So control at the right levels, right?
Yeah.
To do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rob. Where can people find you? ServiceRocket, reach out.
Yeah, we're at servicerocket.com. I've started putting a whole bunch of articles together. I guess the one thing I didn't mention is on top of our values, I built these things called leadership behaviors. And this is more about how to train managers and leaders in the company, really everyone, on how we want people to behave. So I started Substack at leadershipbehaviors.org, and you can check those out. And as I get time, I do them in bursts, and we'll get some things out there. So.
Nice. I remember, I remember when I first met you, you were showing me a slide of those at the event. So
yeah,
Rob, thank you so much. This has been a joy. Appreciate your time, effort, and energy.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on the One Away Show. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, please leave a review and follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Have a one away moment you'd like to share? Follow me on Twitter or Instagram at BrianWish_, or reach out to me on LinkedIn and tell me about the moment that altered your life. The One Away Show is produced by Arcbound, a company dedicated to helping entrepreneurs, experts, and visionaries launch authentic personal brands. From message development to podcast production, social media content generation, and book writing, we work with you to create your arc. Head to arcbound.com to learn more. Thank you for listening, and please join me next time on The One Away Show.